Tom Hartman in Washington, D.C., and here's what's coming up tonight on The Big Picture. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is out of the White House. Reality Check founder Alan Tonelson will be here to discuss whether executive branch chaos will prevent President Trump from carrying out his campaign promises. And our panel guests, Justin Duckham and Brian Pruitt, will discuss what may be a national security disaster at Trump's Mar-a-Lago open-air Situation Room. In an unprecedented move, Michael Flynn has left his post as National Security Advisor less than 1 month into Trump's presidency. According to the White House, Flynn simply had to leave because he lost the president's trust.
The issue, plain and simple, came down to a matter of trust. And once that occurred, it was over. And frankly, I believe a couple publications even reported that there was no investigation for a reason, because there was not an issue of law, it was an issue of trust.
But Michael Flynn's departure wasn't the only blemish on Trump's foreign policy this week. Author Alan Tonelson explained in a recent article that despite Trump's tough campaign talk about Japan, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe plainly was able to fill a policy vacuum created both by the Trump administration's growing pains and its thin staffing. Joining me now for more on this is Alan Tonelson, founder of Reality Check and author of The Race to the Bottom. Alan, welcome back.
Tom, great to be back as always.
Great having you with us. So first of all, what does Flynn's resignation tell us about the state of affairs in the Trump administration, and how might that impact his ability to move forward on his trade policy, which might be one of the few areas where both Republicans and Democrats, you know, if you look at the polls, actually agree?
Sure. Well, aside from the obvious message that the Flynn fiasco has been sending, which is that the new administration has a major challenge in getting its organizational act together, even judging by the standards that we should apply to administrations that are just starting out. I thought that what this episode really revealed, especially in the context of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to Washington at the end of last week, is that there is a major rift that's dividing Team Trump on how to deal with U.S. interests in East Asia, whether we're talking about economic interest or we're talking about national security interests. And perhaps a little simplistically put, on the one side, you've got folks who represent a more traditional view of U.S. national interests that is national security oriented, that's been shifted a little bit recently toward containing China. And those people take a look at that map of East Asia and they see that it's going to be a lot easier to do if we've got important allies like Japan and South Korea. But there's one other camp in Team Trump, if I could mix metaphors, that would argue that America's main interests in the Far East, whatever they were during the Cold War, are now plainly economic, and Japan and South Korea are most important not as national security allies, because after all, they do very little to contribute to American national security. They're most important as major trade and economic policy problems. And the coinciding of this Abe visit with the Flynn firing created this major policy vacuum, the resulting confusion, which didn't start this past week. It's been in existence for really since President Trump was inaugurated. Prime Minister Abe was able to fill that policy vacuum and extract from President Trump a very emphatic declaration that, at least for this week or this month, he's on that more traditionalist side. He values Japan very highly as a national security ally, and by extension is not likely to put tremendous pressure on the Japanese government to open its market to U.S. exports.
Yeah. Now you write that Japan is both a predatory trading partner,
sure, absolutely,
and a classic defense free rider. Now these are both arguments that Donald Trump made on the campaign trail,
absolutely,
particularly during the Republican primaries, and yet all mention of either of those things seems to have completely vanished. You want to first define what those terms mean?
Sure. When I use the term predatory trader, it means that Japan has used all manner of not only protectionist policies in terms of keeping its market tightly closed behind very high trade barriers that consist not of both tariffs and also what trade mavens call non-tariff barriers, various Mickey Mouse rules and
things like
regulations,
domestic content rules,
right, or even health and safety rules, whose main intent really isn't protecting the health and safety of the Japanese people, but keeping foreign products out, as well as frequently manipulating currency, keeping the value of its currency artificially low to make sure that Japanese products can outprice U.S. products in markets all over the world. So Japan is a major example of a globally important predatory trader, but it's also a major defense-free rider in the sense that Japan, even though it's located in a really bad neighborhood next to its historic adversary Russia, its historic adversary China, next to its former colony South Korea, which hates it. Despite that very precarious location, Japan spends very little for its own national defense. Why? It has a rock-solid guarantee that the United States will ride to its rescue if it runs into trouble, and therefore it's been able to free ride on that U.S. defense guarantee.
So the first person to come to the United States and meet Donald Trump after the election, I mean, even before he was inaugurated, was Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan. Boom, he was on a plane. He was here within days of the election, as I recall. He's also the second, only the second behind Theresa May, foreign leader to actually meet face-to-face with Donald Trump. It turned into a whole three-day hoop-de-doop. Let's go to Mar-a-Lago, et cetera. And it sure looks to me like he got absolutely everything he wanted. He gets to continue being a defense-free rider. He gets to continue being a predatory free trader, as it were, using your language. And with nary a peep from Donald Trump, who campaigned on how he was going to kick Japan's butt in these two areas that are frankly costing the U.S. taxpayers and U.S. consumers trillions of dollars.
That's right, and lots of jobs. And
so how did he get away with this?
Well, one other very important aspect of this is that also during the campaign, candidate Trump made a very important point about American alliance strategy in East Asia that is constantly overlooked in the foreign policy world, and I think actually very deliberately swept under the rug. These days, because China has large and increasingly impressive nuclear forces that can hit this country, because North Korea has followed China down that road also and poses a growing, very important nuclear threat, the U.S. alliance with Japan and South Korea is creating major dangers of nuclear attack for this country. And it's not that North Korea or China represents a direct threat, because we can, in theory, deter whatever attack they're thinking of making on this country through the threatened use of our own forces, our own nuclear deterrent. But they do pose an enormous threat to Japan and South Korea, and frankly, Americans have a very strong right to ask, why would any American president risk Los Angeles or Chicago or Washington, D.C. to save Tokyo or to save Seoul? And that sounds very cold-blooded.
Or Taipei.
Or Taipei. It sounds very cold-blooded, but that is exactly the kind of very intense dilemma that we're heading toward very rapidly.
So are you suggesting that a conflict in Southeast Asia, an attack against, Taipei is actually the one that everybody is saber-rattling around, although Japan and South Korea, you correctly point out, do not have the very best relationship with China. If anything, they're both economic and political and military adversaries. That any sort of conflict in that region could essentially be an Archduke Ferdinand moment, where a local conflict turns into a worldwide conflagration, only this time nuclear.
And let me get you even more depressed. It's not only likely to happen, but its current U.S. strategy strangely enough, to make sure that that happens, we really will not have an effective option of sitting out that conflict for a very simple reason. There are 25,000 or so American troops sitting right on the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, whose mission basically is to get killed in a North Korean attack that nobody thinks the South can possibly defeat on its own, which is why it would need the threat of U.S. nuclear forces. Stationed in Japan, you've got about 50,000 U.S. forces, again, very close to that danger zone, and it's their presence that's calculated to raise the threat that the United States will come in with nuclear weapons.
So basically, we've positioned U.S. soldiers
right in harm's way.
Right in harm's way, to by way of saying, if you mess with South Korea, you're going to have to kill us first, and if you kill us, then there'll be hell to pay. If you mess with Japan, you're going to have to kill us first. You kill us, there'll be hell to pay. And is that the mutually assured destruction kind of thing?
Something like that. And it might have made sense. It arguably did make sense because it worked for many, many years during that Cold War period. But at that time, the United States had an overwhelming nuclear edge, and the North Koreans and Chinese had no real capacity to attack us in that way. Now, they either have it or they're rapidly getting it. And so the very high risks of this U.S.-Asian alliance strategy, which were really kept under control during the Cold War, are threatening to spin out of control.
Wow. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is so impressed. That
seems to be somewhat at sea.
Seems
to be somewhat at sea.
It's remarkable. Alan Tonelson, it's always great having you, Alan.
Of course. Thanks so much
for dropping by. Coming up, are Republicans embracing bunk science to tell women that they're just toaster ovens? We'll be talking about that and more in tonight's Big Picture Politics panel.
Here's what people have been saying about Redacted tonight.
Give it to us.
Redacted is full-on awesome. The only show I go out of my way to watch every week. It really packs a punch. Lee Camp is the John Oliver of RT America.
They do have the same accent.
Hey, we are apparently better than boobs.
Nothing's better than boobs.
You see, people you've never heard of love Redacted tonight. The president of the World Bank, though, hates it.
He doesn't really have any taste.
Seriously, you send us an email.
People with stories to tell. Those who deserve to be heard. Studied inside out, but still with unrevealed secrets. Leaders, politicians, thinkers, and witnesses. They're here to speak. Are you there to hear?
It's only 3 weeks into Donald Trump's administration, and Republicans are making it crystal clear that they only believe in government oversight when it comes to one person, Hillary Clinton. Over the weekend at Trump's private Mar-a-Lago resort, the club's members were treated to front row seats to see how the president responded to a North Korean ballistic missile test. So where's the Republican outrage about Trump mishandling our nation's security secrets? Let's ask tonight's Big Picture Politics panel. With me for tonight's politics panel are Brian Pruitt, contributor to Red State, and Justin Duckham, political commentator. Thank you both for being with us tonight. Great having you both. Yeah. So one club member, I mean, this has been an interesting weekend at Mar-a-Lago. One club member named Richard DeAgazio, presumably, uploaded 2 since-deleted posts to Facebook, painting a disturbing picture of how much access to the president a Mar-a-Lago resident can buy for $200,000. First post showed DeAgazio photographed with Rick, who carries the president's nuclear football, And the second post showed how close a Mar-a-Lago resident could get to Trump and Prime Minister Abe as the two leaders discussed the potential nuclear crisis. Jason Chaffetz and Trey Gowdy wasted more than $7 million of taxpayer dollars and hundreds of hours in congressional hearings just investigating Hillary Clinton for a non-existent Benghazi cover-up and for using an unsecured private email server. And just 1 month ago, Chaffetz announced that he will continue to investigate Hillary Clinton for her use of an unsecured private email server. So when will Chaffetz, Gowdy, and other security hawk Republicans call for an investigation into Trump's use of his private club as an open-air situation room? Or are House Republicans like Chaffetz and Trey Gowdy too afraid to do their jobs and conduct oversight of this administration because their base actually likes how Trump flaunts the rules?
Let's get the facts straight. One, all the sensitive information today, Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, confirmed that there is a secure room, that the Secret Service and the Defense Department have set up a secure room at Mar-a-Lago because it's
Hillary Clinton
used.
had a secure email account available to her. She chose not to use it.
The idea
that the secure room.
The idea that President Trump was discussing national security issues at the dinner table with all those people around, I think is misleading. I think and it's inaccurate. Today, they clarified that any sensitive information was discussed in the secure room. Donald Trump likes Mar-a-Lago. It's his presidency, and he's welcome to eat dinner with whomever he wants. As far as I know, everyone went through security, so there's no. I think this is much.
In other words, no one was carrying a bomb. That doesn't mean no one was there who wasn't representing, a foreign power or. Justin, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, also according to Spicer, this was a conversation about logistics. Now, I'm not really sure what logistics Trump would be discussing about the press conference. I don't think he was necessarily phoning up the satellite trucks to make sure the uplink worked. The only reason a conversation in that setting would make sense would be to discuss what was going to be said at the follow-up press conference. So I think it's pretty ridiculous on the face of it, and it also really counters the administration's own logic when it comes to how they handle national security. We've seen for months that Trump is saying that he can't tell anybody what he's going to do abroad, he can't telegraph his actions, but somehow that doesn't really stop him from telegraphing exactly what he's going to be saying and how he's going to be handling, as you mentioned, a nuclear situation in clear plain sight.
Yeah, so he keeps it secret unless you pay $200,000.
Right.
I just disagree with the premise. I think he was having dinner with the Prime Minister. He's much more casual when he feels comfortable at
What's
at
wrong with
Mar-a-Lago.
standing up, walking out of the room?
That's what he did. If you heard the TikTok today at the press briefing, is that happened actually twice. That's what Sean Spicer said, was that they went to the secure room twice during that entire evening to discuss the sensitive information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do you think that the Republicans will investigate it, Brian?
I don't think this is worth investigating.
Do you think Hillary Clinton's email was worth investigating?
Absolutely. And I think the Mike Flynn Russia information is very important to investigate.
Your thoughts, John?
I think this probably will be investigated. Whether or not it's going to be investigated with the same kind of, feverish desire we saw from the Benghazi probe, I don't see that happening. I think there may be sort of a cosmetic approach to this, but I don't see this reaching the same level of just aggressiveness that we saw with Benghazi.
Time will tell. I mean, nobody thought there was anything there with Benghazi at first either, so who knows. And apparently there's nothing there anyway, according to 7 different Republican-controlled studies. House Democrats have criticized their Republican counterparts for not holding the Trump administration accountable. Here's Congressman Elijah Cummings at a press conference earlier today.
Do you hear the silence? This is the sound of House Republicans conducting no oversight of President Trump. Zero. That is what it sounds like when they abdicate their duty under the Constitution.
Okay, so very quickly, is he just being partisan?
Absolutely.
Or is this, okay, you just think of this as partisan, Justin?
Well, I mean, this is the Oversight Committee. I think Cummings is taking his role seriously, and there, frankly, is a role that Congress needs to play with what the administration is doing right now.
Yeah, even if the oversight is, hey, there's no there, shouldn't somebody look at it?
I think this Representative Cummings isn't serving himself well by trying to make hay.
Okay, moving along. According to the Guttmacher Institute, Oklahoma ranks second in terms of the number of anti-abortion and anti-birth control restrictions passed in any state in the United States since the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision in '73. And now Representative Justin Humphreys, state representative in Oklahoma, wants to combine the Republican anti-choice agenda with the Republican anti-science agenda. Humphreys has submitted a bill that would require a woman who is seeking an abortion to get written permission from a man, specifically her sexual partner. Humphreys told The Intercept's Jordan Smith that what I call him is, you're a host. So that's where I'm at. I'm like, hey, your body is your body and be responsible with it, but after you're irresponsible, then don't claim, well, I can just go and do this with another body, when you're the host and you invited that in. But all this sounds eerily like Humphreys is promoting the idea of the homunculus, the idea that there are fully formed little humans in men's sperm, and that a man simply deposits the little human into a host woman, and then like a bun in an oven, the host woman simply grows the little human into a baby. That idea, which, by the way, held for about 6,000 years, is about as scientific as alchemy. And Anton von Leeuwenhoek showed that the homunculus isn't real all the way back in the 17th century when he invented the microscope. So why are Republicans in Oklahoma trying to take women's rights back to the 1640s using centuries-old discredited science?
First and foremost, this guy's an idiot. I mean, to be so disrespectful to women, no matter your position.
It's not just this guy. There's a whole bunch of Republicans in Oklahoma who have lined up to co-sponsor his bill.
I believe it's absolutely inaccurate to paint all Republicans, and more importantly, all people that are pro-life, with this sort of brush. This is not what the pro-life movement is about. And the pro-life movement enjoys broad support among middle America for things like a 20-week abortion ban, those sort of middle-of-the-road laws that are getting passed across the country. This proposal and his language is
right now it's functionally 24 weeks.
Well, no, and if you look at Oklahoma, this is actually a state that's very aggressive when it comes to women's rights, when it comes to reproductive rights. So I think this is, pretty much emblematic of what we're seeing from the state's Republican Party. And, secondly, I don't think this is a situation of somebody who's well-versed in 17th century science, but he certainly is just kind of grasping at straws to try to make it sound like he has a scientific argument, which is probably just, which is even worse. And it really shows how flimsy the science behind pro-life ideas really are. When you're resorting to using language like a host, which I guess would make men into a virus in this situation, it just kind of shows that you're not a doctor and you probably shouldn't be acting like one.
The most important thing here is that the pro-life movement needs to focus on spokespeople who are women. There are millions of pro-life women out there, and we need less of people like this state legislator and more voices of female voices articulating the pro-life position.
Yeah. Maybe we could pass a rule or a law that only women get to vote on abortion issues. That would be an interesting outcome. Nearly 200,000 people have been evacuated from their homes surrounding the nation's tallest dam, the Oroville Dam in California. After years of drought conditions, this year's winter precipitation is nearly 120% higher than the 30-year average, completely filling many of the state's reservoirs. Right now, the Oroville Dam is holding back more than 1 trillion gallons of water, and erosion has caused a hole to form in one of the emergency spillways, threatening to flood the city of Oroville and forcing hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate. That hole shouldn't come as any surprise, though, because 3 environmental groups way back in 2005 filed a warning with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that the emergency spillway might fail. President Bush and Governor Schwarzenegger both apparently ignored the warning. So is this an early wake-up call for Republicans and for Trump that we need to invest to rebuild our nation's crumbling infrastructure and that we need to design it for our planet's changing climate? Or are we going to continue the Republican infrastructure plan of neglect it till it fails and then privatize it? Justin?
Well, I mean, this is obviously a dam that was built in the 1960s. California is going through extreme weather patterns. Last year was finally the end of about a 5-year drought.
Well, half the state is still in drought right now.
Well, this has still been California's wettest year on record. And going from a 5-year drought to that absolutely shows that it is going through some pretty extreme climate change, one that the infrastructure, as this case shows, just is not ready to accept.
Yeah. So
I disagree with the climate change side of your argument. It's going to be interesting. I find the politics most interesting because the president is interested in doing infrastructure projects. Let's see if Governor Jerry Brown will come together and work with a Republican president to bring both state money and federal money to bear against, I believe the number I read just to fix this dam is $100 to $200 million. Possibly,
which is,
so that's a big price tag. But in
it's
the
a big
context
price tag for California. It's like 30 seconds of the Defense Department's budget here in Washington D.C.
Certainly, fair point. But this needs to be a state and federal partnership to fix this.
So
this was
can you point to any Republicans or the administration, for that matter, who have proposed any infrastructure funding or legislation that might actually apply to this?
I think if President Trump and Governor Brown were to stand together and demand or respectfully request the Congress pass the $100 to $200, as a state federal, I believe it would pass tomorrow.
Justin, wouldn't this be an opportunity for Donald Trump to play the role of statesman? Do you expect him to step up to it?
I don't expect him to step into that role. Right now, Jerry Brown is in a state that has a lot of sanctuary cities and scary things that the Trump administration is trying to fight back against pretty heavily.
Too many liberals?
I mean, unfortunately, I would like to imagine a world where Donald Trump would step up and be, bipartisan and take on a statesman-like role, even with somebody who is a political opponent like Jerry Brown. But I just don't see that happening.
I think Reagan would have.
I believe he would have, absolutely. Let's see where Nancy Pelosi is on this issue. Why isn't she trying to take the lead? Democrats, instead of electing a Midwestern Democrat to lead them, they chose Nancy Pelosi. Let's see if she can make this an issue.
There you go, guys. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks. And now the big picture fact of the day. Earlier this year, the Canadian province of Alberta put in place a $20 per ton carbon tax. And far from killing the economy, Alberta's households are already getting their money back. Under Alberta's carbon tax scheme, individuals who earn less than $47,000 will get a rebate of $200. Households that earn less than $101,000 will get $360 back. Over the next 5 years, Alberta's government is expected to receive $9.6 billion in revenue from this that can be used for green infrastructure and other sustainable technology. And that's the way it is tonight. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it.